Most businesses only focus on growing and expanding, and they give little to no attention to their exit strategies until after exit is staring them in the face. Learn here at Boosting Business Value, brought to you by Blue Sky Business Resources. You'll discover how to shape a more durable and saleable business, and how to implement a powerful, well-planned, and rewarding exit. Join Dr. David Gruder and Jason Tuzinkewich as they deliver actionable tips for lower middle market company owners, executives, and their trusted advisors. Find out where your business currently stands, how you can meet your revenue objectives more reliably, and how to grow your venture to the next level, all with a smooth and fruitful exit in mind. Here are your hosts, Dr. David and Jason.
Welcome. This is the second part of our two-part series in becoming upheavals resilient. In the first part, we unpacked key types of upheavals that are important to prevent and monitor. Now we're going to get into the fun stuff. We're going to discuss ways to make your company more resilient against upheavals. And so for those of you who are new to the show, I'm Jason Tuzinkewich, Chief Operations Officer for Blue Sky Business Resources. And with me is my good friend and astute co-host, Dr. David Gruder. He's our Blue Sky's business lifecycle, exit planning, and post-acquisition psychologist. Doctor, take it away.
Okay, so let's start with the things that we think are really important in becoming upheavals resilient. And the first of those is understanding leader temperament or lenses, because what too commonly happens among executive teams is that there's competition among the executives over whose perspective is going to dominate decision-making. And that isn't what creates effective executive teams. Here's the scoop. If you've got an operations officer, let's say, there you go. The chief operations officer has to have a very specific relationship with risk, time frame for decision making and strategic planning and tactical implementation. That's easy for me to say. And if we contrast that with, let's say, the chief financial officer, they've got to have a very different set of risk tolerances. You contrast that with the chief sales or marketing or R&D person, and again, you get a whole different set of risk tolerances. Those are necessary differences. You don't want, for example, someone who is in the role of the chief financial officer to be all about change and innovation and all of that stuff. The chief financial officer is really supposed to be preserving predictability, organization, standards, stability in an organization. That's what their focus needs to be. That's what their advocacy needs to be about. Whereas in contrast,
make me crazy.
Whereas in contrast, whoever is in charge of things like sales and marketing and research and development, if they are not into transformation and change and innovation and all kinds of stuff that's the opposite of stability, predictability, then they're not going to be really good in their role. It's really crucial that leader teams develop a deep appreciation of what the temperament needs to be for each of the executives in their particular role, and the lenses that each of those executives need to look through in order to fulfill their role and voice on behalf of their responsibilities effectively, so that collaboration occurs on the team where there isn't this competition over whose lens is right, but there instead is the co-creation of a jigsaw puzzle where all the necessary lenses on the part of each of the executives get to be pooled together in order to come up with integrative decisions about goals, timeframes, strategy, tactical plans, all of those kinds of things. So that's the first area that's crucial for upheaval's resilience is all of the leaders having an authentic appreciation of every other leader's and their own temperament and lenses so they can collaborate well together rather than try to dominate over each other.
Yeah. And one of the neat things about going through this work, really, of understanding leader temperament and the lens is that once you understand these different temperaments and the needs within specific leadership roles, it becomes easier to determine as a team organically who should carry the most weight in every different decision-making scenario, because historically the CEO gets the final say, right? In a thriving, organic, agile, and nimble culture, the CEO should be able to leverage the voice of everybody else to affect the best final say. And that comes with an understanding of what you just talked about, the temperament and the lenses, and knowing who should be given most weight in every discussion. And the more that there's transparency on that, the easier that collaboration becomes.
That's a beautiful add-on to what I was saying. Thank you for that. And so the second dimension of becoming upheavals resilient is something that I have long referred to as tensions competence. And what that means is that things are very rarely black and white, either or, this or that, binary. They're very rarely that cut and dry. And yet people seek the clarity they think they get by oversimplifying things into either or. And that generally leads to really poor decision making and actually spawns upheavals. Tensions competence, on the other hand, is the process or the emotional intelligence that allows us to be comfortable with ambiguity, not to tolerate it permanently, but not to go into anxiety when an ambiguous or unclear situation appears, but to approach that ambiguity with curiosity so that there's an emerging awareness of multiple dimensions that are involved, multiple factors that are involved, rather than the rigidity of either or thinking, where we enter into both and thinking, synergized thinking, integrative thinking. That's the essence of tensions competence. And mostly people come into companies not having been trained in tensions competence skills. So as leaders of a company, a leader, an executive, a CEO can either complain about how none of their people have tensions competence, or they can accept that we don't live in an educational system that really develops tensions competence so that each company takes responsibility for developing that in their properly selected personnel.
Yeah, and this is one of those areas where the difference between the documents hanging on our walls becomes so apparent. Because when I talk to business owners, I say, you know what? When it comes to making decisions, you've got to figure out what the knowledge needs are and what the knowledge like to haves are. And somewhere after the needs are met, a decision must be made. And you've got this beautiful little tensions competence language and framework that I love. But again, that's because you've got different documents hanging on your wall. Kudos to you.
And because we're demonstrating it right now and throughout all of our episodes about looking at business through different lenses, where you and I have had many discussions about how our lenses are complementary to each other. We synergize well with our lenses. We don't go into competition over my lens is better than your lens or your lens is better than my lens. What's the bigger picture that emerges when we combine our lenses? And that's part of tensions competence.
Yep, absolutely. Although your lenses are awful nice.
Yours aren't too shabby yourself. Let's get past all this self-congratulation and move on to the third aspect of tensions, not tensions competence, but of upheavals literacy. And that is about impact literacy. So we mentioned in part one of this two-part series something called learned helplessness, which again is where people have been trained into believing that they have less power, less influence, or less impact than they actually do, whether positive or negative. And the antidote to learned helplessness, which so many people come into companies with that mindset as a pre-existing condition that needs to be retrained, is impact literacy, where we help people learn how to anticipate the impacts of their actions, of their commitments, of following through on those commitments, of not following through on those commitments that they make. And where, when inevitably there are times when we can't fully anticipate what our impacts are going to be, then as soon as we become aware of unintended impacts, we immediately bring those up so that we can make mid-course corrections in light of the unanticipated. And so impact literacy is a skill set just like tensions competence is, and it's a skill set that's learnable, and it's a skill set that is crucial to having an upheavals resilient company.
So true. And keep thinking about this impact and helplessness portion and just how big of a deal this is. And it's shocking to me that more people aren't talking about it. It's funny to me that almost everybody to a person is extraordinarily literate on received impact, but phenomenally illiterate on delivered impact. And I think that's something that it's important. And so I love that you keep bringing this up. I really appreciate it. And then the last element that we wanted to talk about is the ability or inability to plan strategically. And this is another one of those things that's shocking to me, but real strategic planning, durable, robust strategy and planning is not something you do very often, which boggles the consciousness because it's so important in everything that we do. And because of the fact that you don't see it very much in the educational system and you don't see it emphasized very much culturally in businesses, you end up with a lot of owners who are operators. This is really where I think a lot of employees start to get the idea these knuckleheads at the top don't know what they're doing. I could do this so much better. I'm going to start my own company and blow them out of the water because they're extraordinary tacticians, great operators. And great tacticians have a hard time understanding the difference between their excellence at the granular implementation and the macroscopic large-scale plan that leads to more effective, durable implementation. And the thing about a strategy is that it's not just about saying, here's where we are, here's where we're going. It's about taking stock of what has to happen between here and here to get us there. And that's the part of strategic planning that I think is very much a learned skill. It's highly nuanced. And if you and your team are lacking in this, this is one of those places where either establishing an executive mentor or getting support from a third-party team that can guide you through this process is going to be critical, because if you don't have a long-term durable plan, then your life changes the second something unexpected happens. Whereas if you have a good strategy, that something unexpected is built in. And so you know which direction to weave in, what adjustments to make. And it's, oh, that just happened. Here's how we proceed. And that's the big difference. And that's where people can really be resilient to upheaval.
Well said. And what I'll add to that is, I think it's important for business owners and executive teams and boards to think about business success as essentially a three-legged stool. The first leg is vision, mission, goals, strategy. The second leg is tactical architecture. And the third leg is tactical implementation, right? This is part of why I'm a real advocate of reorganization of executive teams, of C-suites, into a T-suite and an S-suite. The S-suite is the strategy suite. It's the executives who are the strategic thinkers. And the T-suite is the executives who are the tactical thinkers. It's not that one is better than the other. they're both absolutely necessary. However, strategy precedes tactics, and businesses that do tactical implementation without a strategy end up floundering. They're doing the spaghetti against the wall approach, and that is not economically viable over the long run.
Yeah, and more sophisticated than myself might even puff on immersion pipe and say, oh, sounds like you've got a leader temperament and lens issue here in these two different teams. Very interesting.
Who might that be? I have to pull out my pipe now.
Yes, you will. No, I love that. And I really appreciate it. I like this idea that you brought up of having basically two divisions within the executive team to lead the tactical work and the visionary work. And this kind of ties into something that we talked about in episode 1, which was making sure that you have one or more people who can lift their head above the fray, get out of what we're now calling the tactical work, the heads down operational work, and keep an eye on the bigger picture, as well as the external world around the organization. Now you're saying it's not just one person, but it's this whole division within leadership. And I love it. I think that's powerful.
Absolutely. And just for clarity, you didn't mean episode 1 of this podcast series. You meant part 1 of this 2-part series here.
So true. Me and semantics, man. Watch out. Oh, we've had a great conversation. We talked about a lot of issues and unknown challenges. Let's get back to my favorite part, which is how do we turn this all into success? How do people take everything that we've talked about and apply it to their business today?
And this is going to be pretty much a summary because we've already embedded this into what we've covered. So what to look for in a solution? First thing is look for training in how to recognize leader temperament and lens differences, these necessary differences, so that your executive team develops authentic appreciation of why those temperament and lens differences are necessary and how to capitalize on them. So that's the first thing to look for in a solution in becoming an upheavals resilient company. The second, as we've talked about, is tensions, competence, training. And part of that I didn't mention earlier is training in how to look beneath surface positions, because surface positions end up in wars, in arm wrestling matches over whose position is right. And the solution to that in tensions competence training is looking beneath surface positions to discover everyone's deep concerns and high intentions that fuel their particular surface positions, and combining those deep concerns and high intentions that everyone has, so you actually generate truly integrative solutions.
Yes, deal with the causes, not the symptoms, my friends.
Well said. And then the third of the 4 ingredients in becoming more upheavals literate, upheavals effective in a company is impact literacy, as we talked about before. So making sure that your team has impact literacy training that includes collaborative accountability mechanisms, because the notion of accountability, as you so beautifully said previously, where accountability has been hijacked into a dirty word, accountability is not a coercion, punishment, or shame tactic, even though it's too commonly used or misused that way. What accountability really is, something that promotes and facilitates collaboration and healthy cultures. And so there are a small set of mechanisms, of procedures that create collaborative culture building accountability, that when those are installed, you get a highly impact literate culture.
I love it. I love it. And then last but not least is strategic planning. Get the resources, whether that's training, whether that's third-party support, whether it's direct mentorship of the executive team. Get the support that you need to ensure that you can develop robust and durable strategic plans that build all the way down into implementable tactics And I love the fact that you had the tactical implementation and the tactical framework as two separate things. First few times you start writing a strategic plan, that tactical framework will be a shambles by the time you're done. Because you're going to learn. You're going to learn the nuances of how your operation works that you didn't pay attention to before when you were just doing instead of working a plan. And so getting the help to not only create these plans, but to create the strategic plan, create the implementation framework, implement, and then reiterate, make the changes all the way back up that process that are necessary until you have a smooth, consistent flow of strategies that are working. And that's at the end of the day, it all comes down to identifying the needs for growth and then getting the support to achieve that growth within your team. And so since we made our strategic success roadmap, also the key takeaways, I'm going to end this one a little different. I'm going to end it with a couple challenges. I'd like to challenge you, the listener, to come back to your team and talk about these opportunities for development in order to become Upheavals resilient. And you ask your team, how are we going to address these things? How will we receive and implement training to grow our team in the way that will make us more resilient? And who are our resources going to be? Who is our external team that will help us grow as an organization? What are the gaps in that external team, and how do we go about filling those seats? And so I think this will be very helpful. Obviously, Blue Sky Business Resources is always available for a free consultation to help guide you in the questions that you have no answer to. But you've got your trusted advisors as well. And I bet a lot of them can provide great resources also.
Well said. And at the risk of sounding self-serving, I'm going to add one other takeaway, which is the Nimble C-Suite and the Nimble Company, that companion volumes, books that are available in print and digital and audiobook versions. And they are co-authored by Mark S.A. Smith and myself. And they go into a lot of detail with many of the things that we've covered in this two-part series on becoming Upheavals literate.
Great reads. I will second the recommendation to check those out.
Thank you for that. And so with that, on behalf of Jason Tuzinkewich and myself, we want to thank you once again for listening to this episode and hopefully both parts of this two-part series. And as Jason and I have been saying all along, we really do look forward to reading your thoughts and questions and topic suggestions and other requests you might have, because you are co-creating this podcast with us to the extent that you provide us with input about what's important to you. And so provide those to us in the comments section that accompanies every episode in our podcast series, our Boosting Business Value podcast. And along with that, we for sure want to always invite you to click on the subscribe button so that you are notified as soon as a future episode drops and becomes available. So thank you once again for being with us, and we look forward to joining you next time.
That's all for this episode of Boosting Business Value. May your new learning result in the smoothest and most profitable exit strategy for your business. With the right knowledge and guidance, the sky's the limit to what you can do. Do not miss an episode by subscribing to the show. And if you want to learn where your business currently stands, we also have free key opportunity assessments. Find all of them at blueskyadvisors.net/podcast. Thank you for joining us. See you on the next one.